We're here today to hear three perspectives concerning how the state structures transgendered experiences and how social norms are perpetuated through legal institutions. As a group, we read the entirety of boxes 7 and 15 while touching on boxes 6 and 10. We felt that this gave us a good understanding of what their content was. For my section, I looked at the military aspect of the trans archives, focusing on the laws, rules, practices, and experiences of the individuals involved. What I found was interesting, and as the military had passed laws to prevent gender and sexual discrimination, formerly in Articles 4.1 or Section 9.83.01 and Section 9.83.01, subsection 9, all of which clearly lay out the intolerance of sex or gender discrimination. Further, Section 9.83.01, subsection 9, goes on to explicitly define gender to include transgender and homosexual persons. Having read these laws, it was initially confusing for me to notice that transgendered persons only had negative responses to their experience within the military institution. An example can be noted in Abby Green's book. She described endless surveys and appeared feminine while still harboring the male gender, and would be released if to be found transgendered. The experiences and laws are not congruent with one another. The laws appear to be empty promises. It appeared that although the military had passed these laws, they were minimized in another way, possibly under further law under Section 983.01, which said that rights aren't civil rights for all people, but promote public health and welfare. The empty promises and discriminatory behavior just thwarted the transgender's individual life to integrate into society. What I found in the trans archives with regard to the military aspect were legal documents and personal recollections, not the recollections of their friends or family or other persons involved, but mainly the experiences of the transgender individuals themselves, in the form of published books, private letters. Books are a more formal way to shed light on their challenges, while letters gave a more personal recollection of their experiences and struggles. What I noticed, which has been a theme within the course, is that with various forms of gender and sexual orientations that appear deviant from the norm, follows discrimination and domination from that which is the norm. Society perpetuates the accepted norm by as a generally heterosexual cisgendered person through the law and institutions. That which does not fall under the norm is discriminated against, marginalized, and subjugated within societal solidarity. Laws and appearances create a facade hiding the truth that people in being different are not yet accepted in society, that their oppression is real and unnecessary. We are now going to hear Belinda's perspective of the trans archives and her experience therewith. Do this.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Matt. Okay, so let's start with my experience in the archives. So in my section, I was concerned with focusing on research done with the aim of influencing public and political opinions in society about transgenders. So bearing in mind the general theme that we as a group decided on, which as Matt stated, was how the state structures transgendered experiences and how social norms are perpetuated through legal institutions. So I wanted to look at how perhaps research and interviews done on transgendered individuals could be used as an academic text of support for public opinion and government policy. The document that caught my eye was found in box 15 of the Ricky Swing edition of the archives. So while running through this document, I came across a booklet that immediately caught my attention because of its title. It was called The Uninvited Dilemma. And this was a text that was meant for public distribution as a research supplement. What I found interesting about this book written by Kimberly Elizabeth Stewart was that it could be argued that this book was meant to help lay the claim that transgendered individuals created a problem not only nationally, but we're a dilemma transnationally. So this is reinforced by the book's title itself and the time frame in which it was written. This book was written in 1985, which, as we discussed in class, with respect to the book, The Canadian War on Queers, it was a time in which as the book put it, national security campaigns for the Cold War period, including the war on queers, came out of particular configurations of social and political forces. What is interesting about this text is some of the questions that were asked and that were influenced by this time frame. So one of them that I found interesting was that this book, or of questionnaires and interviews, asked people, putting aside your physical appearance, how do you perceive men and women as different in their emotional makeup? The majority of the respondents to this question stated that and these were all transgendered individuals, stated that they found men to be more emotionally detached and more emotionally stable than women, and women were more sensitive and more emotional, therefore. So, I don't know. So what does this kind of say about the binary between masculinity and femininity? I found myself asking. And my answer to this question, that it proves that the beliefs and perpetuation of gender norms are so entrenched in our society that no one individual can escape them. Even those that we might perceive would have a more fluid understanding of sexuality. Another question that I found interesting was a question that asked, have your responses to situations in life been in a way you perceive men would respond emotionally, or have they been typically female? This was a question that was posed to female to male transgenders, and the majority of them, 9 of the 20 that responded to this question, stated that their responses had matched the reactions of their biological gender. 8 responded by stating their reactions to match the opposite gender, and 3 stated both. One of the many things I believe this class has taught us is that biological sex does not constitute one's choice of gender performance. What we need to bear in mind, though, is that this book was written in a time in which, as the Canadian War on Queers puts it, in which there was a focus on proper forms of masculinity and femininity and heterosexuality. There were wars for normality and against political, gender, and sexual deviance. A section in this text also tries to make a link between one's past relationships with their change in gender. And ask questions like, what are the genders of their spouses now, and what were the genders of their former spouses? I found this to be especially problematic because I believe one of the things that this course has taught me, and as many of my classmates would agree, that sexuality is a fluid construct and not a rigid binary. This is something that Laurie Strauch, in her chapter of Let's Talk About Sex, speaks of when she states that orientations are alterable like choices, but after conscious deliberation. This document also only sampled 20 to 50 transgender individuals, leaving out a large sample of the transgender community that I would believe would have varying thoughts and experiences with being transgender. So I found that also to be very problematic, and I don't know if that affects, to me personally, it should affect the legitimacy of such a document. So that's it. And so now we're going to hear from Nadine on her experience with the archive. So Nadine, come on out.
Okay. For my research, I looked at documents relating to how transgender people interacted with laws. I focused on 2 files from box 6 and 10, more specifically 6.32 and 10.12. I did not look at all of the files within the boxes due in part to the limited amount of hours I was able to spend in the archive, so I prioritized documents relating directly to legal issues. The first file I looked at contained documents relating to the International Conference on Transgender Law and Employment Policy, which is also an organization, and the documents relating to this organization's finances from 1996 to 1997. All the material in this file were public documents for the ICTLEP members, that's the organization I just mentioned, and focused on raising funds for the organization, the ICTLEP, that helps transgender people with legal issues, and raises awareness of the ways in which law affects transgender people. In terms of whose history is being represented, there was an emphasis on highlighting the diversity in the transgender community by describing its membership. However, all the documents in this file were from this organization, ICT-LEP, which means they reflect the perspective of only one organization. Also, family members, significant others, and supportive friends were invited to a conference that's mentioned in the document, and this shows that the effect of law goes beyond transgender people themselves, and this document also attempts to facilitate a wider supportive community. The second file I looked at contained transcription documents of seminars on medical and legal aspects, which occurred in the Fantasia Fair in 1978. These materials fall under the public category, however, it's not clear if there are limitations in access to these documents. Because I was more focused on legal issues, I did not read the transcriptions on the medical seminars. Also, these transcripts were impacted by a different historical context, and the first in that they were produced 18 years earlier. But they do touch on a few similar aspects, such as employment discriminations and legal issues relating to marriage and divorce. Essentially, the function of the seminar was to educate the participants on how to deal with legal issues that affected them. On the other hand, the ICT-LEP documents were more focused on affecting social change. But going back to the transcripts, the way in which they were structured I found a little bit confusing. There was a small legend provided, but it was who was speaking was not included. It was not highlighted. So the only way to know who was speaking was when it was directly stated within the conversation. So it's hard to have a complete picture of representation. It's also important to discuss the power of who is transcribing the documents and if anyone has influence in editing, as this has a significant impact on how the seminar is portrayed. Both of these files concern how transgender people interact with the law and how the state can structure experience that fall outside of how the state defines normal. In this context, what is considered normal is anything outside of heterosexual marriage and identifying as cisgendered. In other words, as Belinda alluded to in her part, and is also discussed on page 23 of the Canadian War on Queers, law reflects how state entrenches norms such as the gender male-female binary and heterosexuality.